On a quiet morning at a luxury watch boutique, a casually dressed black woman walked in, secretly planning to buy a rare timepiece as a gift for her husband. But instead of service, the store staff greeted her with mockery, suspicion, and ultimately humiliation. What they didn't know was that her husband was one of the most powerful men in the city, and he was about to walk through the door, not to shop, but to change everything. The morning sun cast a gentle golden light across New York City's famed Fifth Avenue, where luxury boutiques stood like glittering monuments to extravagance. The streets were calm but alive, the city never truly sleeping. Among the early walkers was Ava Johnson, a 45-year-old black woman whose presence didn't demand attention but carried quiet strength. Dressed in a crisp white t-shirt, soft gray joggers, and clean sneakers, Ava walked with purpose, her natural curls pulled into a neat bun. She wore no makeup, no jewelry apart from a simple gold wedding band. Her style was rooted in comfort, not opulence, and though she had access to unimaginable luxury, she never felt the need to display it. Today was not about indulgence. It was about love. Her husband, Malik Johnson, would be celebrating his birthday in a few days, and Ava had spent weeks thinking about the perfect gift. Not something flashy, not just another item with a price tag, but something meaningful, something with history. She had found it. A vintage chronograph watch, a rare model from 1962, known for its craftsmanship and limited production. Only 5 existed, and one of them was displayed inside the glass walls of Valmont Timepieces, one of the most prestigious watch boutiques in the city. She had confirmed its availability days earlier, verified the details, and made plans to come in personally to buy it. She checked her slim wristwatch. It was 10:30 a.m., which meant she had more than enough time before Malik arrived at noon for their lunch reservation nearby. He didn't know she was out shopping. The watch was meant to be a surprise. Ava paused on the sidewalk outside Valmont Timepieces, her eyes drawn to the sleek glass storefront. The window displays were works of art, elegant timepieces bathed in soft light, resting on velvet cushions beneath shimmering crystal spotlights. Inside, she could see uniformed staff moving with rehearsed precision, assisting impeccably dressed customers. The scent of prestige seemed to float out onto the street. She took a deep breath. Not from nerves, she wasn't someone easily shaken, but to steady herself, to refocus. This was supposed to be a quiet moment of joy. She reached for the gleaming silver handle, pulled open the heavy glass door, and stepped inside. A soft chime rang as the door closed behind her, and the cool, climate-controlled air embraced her skin. A subtle scent of expensive cologne lingered in the air, but no one looked up, no one greeted her. She didn't take offense. She wasn't here to be catered to, she was here to buy a gift. Ava walked toward the far side of the boutique, where a glass display case held the vintage watches. Her eyes moved slowly but directly. She knew what she was looking for. And then she saw it. The Chronomaster 1962 resting like a treasure among the other pieces, its deep leather band and aged silver face telling a silent story of legacy and precision. Malik would love it, not just for how it looked, but for what it meant, for what it represented. She smiled softly to herself. In her heart, this was already his. All she had to do now was buy it. Ava leaned in slightly, admiring the watch through the pristine glass. She noted the delicate engravings, the perfectly aged patina, the story etched into its design. She had read about its origins. Owned once by a pioneering black aviator, restored by a master horologist. It wasn't just a watch, it was history. And Malik, with his deep appreciation for legacy and excellence, would understand that instantly. Just as she was imagining his reaction, a voice broke through the silence, polite in wording but laced with something sharper underneath. "May I help you?" Ava turned. A young white woman stood across the counter dressed in a sleek black uniform. Her blonde hair was pulled into a severe bun, and her eyes scanned Ava from top to bottom, lingering on her sneakers, her casual clothing, the absence of jewelry. Ava caught the glance and knew the look. It wasn't new. "Yes," Ava said calmly, pointing to the timepiece. "I'd like to see that watch, please." The woman's expression didn't change, but her tone tightened ever so slightly. That's a Chronomaster 1962. It's one of our most exclusive pieces. It's priced at $95,000. Ava nodded once. I know. That's the one I'd like to see. The saleswoman, her name tag read Emily, paused, one manicured hand still resting on the counter. Perhaps I could show you some of our more accessible selections? We have a beautiful line of women's fashion watches toward the back, very elegant and more attainable. Ava met her gaze directly, her voice steady. I appreciate the offer, but I came for this one. There was a beat of silence, the kind that thickens the air. Emily pursed her lips, then reached slowly into her pocket and retrieved a small silver key. Her fingers moved with exaggerated care as she unlocked the display, lifting the velvet pad with the Chronomaster and setting it on the counter. Just barely within reach. The space between her and Ava widened, as if to say, "Don't get too close." "It's a limited edition," Emily said, her voice edged with caution. "Only 5 were made. It's not a watch we usually take out for just browsing." Ava didn't flinch. She picked up the watch gently, turning it in her hand, studying the detailing, the fine stitching of the band. "It's perfect," she said softly. "I'll take it." Emily blinked. "You'll take it?" She let out a breath that almost turned into a laugh. "Perhaps you'd like to explore financing options?" "That won't be necessary," Ava replied, still calm, still unshaken. From across the room another presence shifted. A tall man in an impeccable navy suit with slicked back hair had been observing quietly. His name was Richard Caldwell, the boutique's general manager, and he was known for his ruthless attention to detail and an eye, he liked to believe, for who belonged and who didn't. To him, appearances were everything. He had built Valmont's reputation on exclusivity, on knowing instinctively whether someone was here to buy or pretend, and from where he stood, Ava Johnson didn't belong. He straightened his cuffs and strode toward the counter, the leather soles of his shoes clicking softly against the polished floor. His practiced smile was already in place, charming on the surface but hollow beneath. "Is everything all right here, Emily?" he asked, though his eyes never left Ava. "She's interested in the Chronomaster," Emily replied, her tone laden with subtext. She emphasized interested in a way that made it sound questionable. "I see," Richard said smoothly, now turning his full attention to Ava. "Madam, that particular piece is among our most high-value items. We usually require verification for purchases of this caliber, a platinum card or some form of financial confirmation." He tilted his head slightly, the smile never quite reaching his eyes. "I'm sure you understand. We've had issues before, people using our merchandise for social media photos, wasting time." Ava's expression didn't change, though her patience began to stretch thin. "I understand policies," she said evenly, "but I also understand when I'm being profiled. I've made it clear I'm here to purchase this watch. My husband is meeting me shortly. I'd prefer to complete the transaction before he arrives, as this is a surprise." Richard exchanged a glance with Emily, a flicker of amusement passing between them. "Your husband?" he said with mock curiosity. "Of course. Perhaps we can revisit the conversation when he arrives." The implication wasn't subtle. Ava felt the familiar sting, not just of disbelief but of dismissal. The watch she wanted to buy sat inches away, but the door to it had quietly been shut, not with a key but with assumption. She glanced around the boutique, noticed a couple nearby pretending not to watch but clearly listening. She checked her own watch. 11:30. Malik would be there in 30 minutes. She could wait. But that would mean letting them win, letting them believe she needed a man, a name, a status to be taken seriously. She looked back at Richard. "I'm not here to prove anything. I came to make a purchase, that's all." Richard's smile thinned. "And yet, you haven't made one, so until you can demonstrate the ability to complete this transaction, I'm afraid I'll have to ask you to step aside. We have other guests to attend to." And just like that, what should have been a simple, joyful errand had become something else entirely, a statement, a challenge, a quiet battle between dignity and ignorance, one Ava had faced before, but never quite like this. Ava stood motionless for a moment, her fingers still resting gently on the edge of the velvet pad where the chronomaster lay. The air around her had changed. It was thicker now, tense with judgment, coated in quiet condescension. She could feel the stares from the other side of the boutique, discreet glances from well-dressed customers pretending to browse, while clearly watching the unfolding scene. The silence was no longer comfortable. It was expectant, waiting for her to either shrink away or erupt, but she did neither. Instead, she straightened her back, letting the weight of her calmness anchor her. "I'm not stepping aside," she said clearly, her voice even but firm. "And I'm not waiting for my husband to validate my presence here. I came to purchase this watch. If that's a problem, it's not mine." Emily let out a soft, incredulous laugh, barely audible but enough. "I've been here 5 years," she muttered under her breath, just loud enough for Ava to catch. "I can spot a discount hunter from a mile away. You're wasting everyone's time." The words landed harder than Ava expected, not because they were true, they weren't, but because of how confidently they were delivered, how comfortably they were wrapped in arrogance and false certainty. Ava's chest tightened, not with shame but with something colder. She had spent decades moving through rooms where she wasn't expected, through spaces where her skin and her silence were interpreted as weakness, through circles where power had to be announced to be acknowledged. And yet, even now, when she carried enough wealth to buy the entire display case, it still wasn't enough, not because of the money, but because of who they decided she was the moment she walked through the door. Richard had returned from greeting a celebrity near the front of the store, a singer Ava recognized from magazine covers, and now moved toward her again, his expression hardened, the pretense of politeness wearing thin. "Madam," he said in a low voice meant to sound professional, "I believe we've been more than patient with you, but at this point it's clear that you are not a serious buyer." "I told you," Ava began, but he cut her off with a wave of his hand and a look of finality. "You have no proof of funds, no card, no verification, just a claim and an attitude." He stepped closer, lowering his voice further. "And frankly, we've had too many situations like this. People walking in, touching merchandise, taking pictures, trying to look like they belong. It disrupts our environment. This boutique caters to a very specific clientele." There it was, laid bare without apology, not coded, not subtle, just raw, open exclusion. Ava's voice remained steady, though her hands had begun to tremble ever so slightly. "So, you're asking me to leave, because I don't look like your idea of a customer?" "I'm asking you," Richard said, the corner of his mouth twitching upward in a thin, smug line, "to stop wasting our time and step outside. If your husband arrives and wishes to make a purchase, we'll be happy to assist him." He gestured to the entrance as if performing a favor, his fingers slicing through the air like a final verdict. Ava stared at him for a long moment, searching for something, remorse, doubt, even discomfort, but found none. Only certainty, the kind of certainty that came from years of unchallenged authority and unspoken bias. "This is ridiculous," she said quietly, turning toward the door. "The way you're treating me says more about this store than it ever could about me." Richard followed her closely. "People like you don't belong here," he said under his breath, not loud enough for the others to hear, but sharp enough to cut through skin. The words struck her, not as a surprise, but as confirmation. As they reached the door, he placed a hand lightly on her arm, just long enough to guide, just firm enough to push. It wasn't violent, but it was deliberate. She stepped out into the sunlight, the glass door closing behind her with a click that felt like finality. For a moment, Ava just stood there. The brightness of the street was jarring compared to the cold interior she had just been expelled from. Through the window, she could see Richard turning back toward the staff, saying something that made them laugh while looking in her direction. She didn't need to hear it to know the punchline. She took a slow breath, forcing the sting in her chest to settle. Her watch read 11:40 a.m. Malik would arrive in 20 minutes. Just 20 more minutes and she could let him handle it. Let him walk in and see how they treated her. Let him deal with it in his own way. But that wasn't who she was. Ava had never needed a man, not even her husband, to stand up for her dignity. And she wasn't about to start now. Ava turned away from the boutique's glass door, the warm air of Fifth Avenue brushing against her skin. But the sunshine felt distant, muted somehow, as if the brightness of the world no longer reached her fully. She didn't cry, she never cried in public. But there was a weight in her chest, a slow burning mix of humiliation and disbelief that threatened to pull her shoulders down. Around her, the flow of New York life continued undisturbed. Tourists snapping pictures, locals hurrying past in business attire, the occasional cab horn blaring down the block. But to Ava, it all moved in a haze. She stood still for a moment, not sure whether to walk, wait, or scream. She glanced back at the boutique. Through the window she could see Richard laughing with Emily and another associate, their heads close together, their expressions smug, entertained. They didn't even try to hide it, not even after pushing her out, not even after reducing her, a customer ready to spend $95,000, to nothing more than a punchline. Ava clenched her jaw. 15 years of marriage to one of the most powerful men in the industry had taught her a lot. About business, about class, about race. But the most painful lesson was this: money didn't always buy respect, especially when you looked like her. "Excuse me?" a voice said gently. Ava turned to see a woman approaching. She was in her 50s, white, dressed in a tailored navy blazer and designer heels. She carried a small shopping bag from the boutique, the same boutique that had just cast Ava aside. "I saw what happened in there," the woman continued softly. I just wanted to say, I'm so sorry, that was appalling." Ava met her eyes, surprised not by the sympathy, but by the sincerity in her voice. "Thank you," Ava replied quietly. "I wasn't expecting an apology, especially not from a stranger." "I wouldn't be able to sleep tonight if I didn't say something," the woman said, shaking her head. "They treated you like you didn't belong, and you handled it with such grace, much more than I would have." Ava offered a small, tired smile. "I've had practice." The woman nodded solemnly, glancing back at the boutique. "I hope someone holds them accountable." Ava gave no answer. The truth was, she hadn't decided yet. Part of her wanted to walk away, to pretend the morning hadn't unfolded the way it did. But another part, a quieter, stronger part, knew that letting it go would mean accepting it, and she wasn't sure she could do that. "Thank you again," Ava said gently. The woman reached out and touched her arm briefly, a gesture of support rather than pity, then turned and walked off down the street. Ava stood there for a moment longer, then began walking slowly down the block, not far enough, just far enough to breathe. She didn't want to give Richard the satisfaction of seeing her lingering outside like someone who had been rejected and didn't know where else to go. She needed time to think, to let the fire inside her cool enough that she could decide what came next with a clear head. Her steps were measured, each one peeling away the sting of the last half hour. Still, she couldn't stop herself from checking her watch. 11:45 a.m. 15 minutes. Malik would be there in 15 minutes, and the story wasn't over yet, not by a long shot. At precisely 11:59 a.m., a sleek black Bentley glided to the curb outside Valmont timepieces, its tinted windows reflecting the sunlight and the curious stares of nearby pedestrians. From the driver's seat stepped a uniformed man who moved quickly to open the rear door. Malik Johnson, 48, emerged in a tailored navy suit that hugged his athletic frame with understated elegance. His tie was perfectly knotted, his posture composed, but his eyes scanned the sidewalk with purpose. There was nothing hurried in his steps, but everything about his presence commanded attention. He wasn't just wealthy, he was practiced power in motion. He looked left, then right, and spotted Ava walking back toward the boutique from down the street. Her pace measured, her shoulders squared. Even from a distance, Malik could read her. 15 years of marriage had made him fluent in the language of her silences, and he didn't need to hear a word to know something had gone wrong. As she reached him, she gently touched his arm, trying to ease the tension she already sensed brewing. "I was just taking a walk," she said softly. Malik looked at her face, studied her eyes, saw the thin veil she wore to protect herself. "Someone told me what happened," he said calmly. "A woman. She recognized me." Said you were asked to leave. Ava gave a slow nod. It's nothing, really, just the usual. No, he said firmly, it's not nothing. There was no anger in his voice, but there was heat beneath the surface, controlled, sharp, deliberate, the same tone that made entire boardrooms go silent. Ava could feel it, the shift in him, and she knew. This was no longer just about her. It was about the principle, the insult, the line that had been crossed. Before she could respond, Malik was already walking, his steps deliberate, toward the boutique's glass door. Ava followed a few paces behind, not to stop him, but to witness what came next. Inside the boutique, Richard Caldwell was mid-sentence, recounting the story of the time-waster with a smug grin to a small group of staff. Emily stood beside him, nodding along, her arms folded. They didn't notice the door open until the bell chimed, and when Malik stepped inside, the room seemed to lose air. Even those who didn't recognize him felt it. Bah! That instinctive pause, that hush that falls when someone important enters a room. Richard turned quickly, his smile already forming. Good afternoon, sir. Welcome to Valmont. How may we assist you today? Malik's eyes scanned the boutique before locking onto Richard. I believe you just escorted my wife out of this store. Richard's face froze. Emily blinked. Someone gasped. Behind Malik, Ava stepped through the door, silent, steady, her presence suddenly impossible to ignore. In that moment the staff made the connection. Ava Johnson wasn't just a customer. She was Ava Johnson, wife of Malik Johnson, the billionaire CEO whose name moved markets and whose investment firm had interests across multiple luxury retail groups, including, unbeknownst to them until now, Valmont. Mr. Johnson, Richard stammered, there's been a terrible misunderstanding. Has there? Malik's tone didn't rise, but it cut like glass. From what I was told, my wife was judged on her appearance, dismissed, humiliated, and physically ushered out of your store, all while attempting to purchase one of your most exclusive pieces. Is that accurate? Richard opened his mouth, but no sound came. Emily stared at the floor. You didn't know who she was, Malik continued, and that's the problem, because it shouldn't matter. It shouldn't take a last name or a net worth to be treated with basic respect. He turned to Ava, his voice softening. Was this the watch you were trying to buy? Ava nodded, pointing to the chronomaster still resting on the velvet pad. Malik smiled briefly at her, then turned back to Richard. I'd like to speak to the owner of this establishment. Mr. Goldstein is currently in Europe, sir, Richard replied quickly, sweating now. But I'm the general manager. I have full authority to... Good, Malik said. Then you'll be the one explaining why this store is about to face a very public relations crisis and why its most exclusive offerings will be pulled from our luxury partnerships. Richard looked as though the ground had shifted beneath him. Sir, please, we had no idea. You didn't need to know, Malik said. That's the point. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a sleek business card, placing it gently on the counter. My office will be in touch regarding your employment status. Richard's mouth fell open. My employment? I should have mentioned, Malik added with a cold smile. My firm finalized acquisition of controlling shares in Valmont Group this morning. Technically, I'm your boss. The silence that followed was deafening. Emily turned pale. One associate dropped a clipboard. Behind them, a customer stared wide-eyed, whispering into her phone. The moment would not stay in that store. But I'm not here to fire anyone, Malik continued. That would be too easy. What I am here to do is implement change. He turned to Ava. My wife has agreed to oversee a new initiative. Comprehensive training in racial bias awareness and equitable customer service. Every staff member will attend, including you. Ava, surprised, looked at him, but she understood. This wasn't about revenge. This was about something bigger. And if you're unwilling to learn, Malik added, now staring directly at Richard, you're welcome to resign immediately. Richard swallowed hard. I would appreciate the opportunity to learn, sir. Excellent, Malik said smoothly. Training begins next week. Now, if you'll kindly complete the purchase my wife intended to make an hour ago, we have a lunch reservation to get to." With shaking hands, Richard processed the transaction, now deferential, now careful, now fully aware of who he had underestimated. The same hands that had pushed Ava toward the exit now wrapped the vintage watch in premium packaging, sealing it with a gold Valmont seal. As Malik and Ava stepped out onto Fifth Avenue, heads turned, phones went up, whispers followed, and behind the glass the staff stood frozen in silence, the weight of the moment sinking in. Over lunch, Malik took her hand across the table, his expression softening for the first time that day. "Was that too much?" he asked. Ava smiled. "Not at all." And as the city moved around them, they sat quietly in that small victory, not because of money or status or names, but because dignity had been defended and justice, real human justice, had finally been served.